Hello everybody, this is General Yanis, and today in Death Card Tactics I'm going to be looking at the Psychic Powers, the Contagion Discipline, and review all the Psychic Powers that we have in the Death Card Codex. So let's get started, even if Mortarion probably disapproves of me walking through these psychic abilities. So today, the 10th March in 2021, so as I said, we'll be reviewing the Contagion Discipline, the Psychic Powers of the Death Card. So I will review the uses and the combinations with our Psykers, what Psyker units do we have, and do we have any potential buffs to cast the Psychic Powers. Then the Psychic Power overview, a detailed analysis of our Psychic Powers, and then some summary recommendations and final thoughts. So with no further ado, let's get started. And by the way, what's up with this thing that the Plaguecaster is blowing out of his mouth? So starting with the Death Card Psyker units, so the units that we have in the Death Card army that can cast the psychic abilities. Of course, we have the Mortarion, who knows 3 powers up on top of Smite, and he can cast 2 every turn, and he can even deny 3 every turn. So really, he hates Psykers, although that he's a potent Psyker himself. And we have, of course, also Typhus, who knows 2 powers and can cast 2 powers every turn and deny 1. We have the Maignant Plaguecaster, also knowing 2 powers, can cast 2 and deny 1. And he has the pestilential fallout ability that gives extra mortal wounds to enemies when he successfully casts a power. So he's basically one of our strongest psychers in the Codex. We have also the Death Card Sorcerer in Terminator Armor, also the same profile here. And then we have, of course, the Death Card Demon Prince. He only knows 1 power. He can cast 1 every turn and deny 1 every turn. So we have several Psyker options in the Death Card army. And basically, if we take a certain combination, we could potentially have Mortarion, we could have Typhus, the Demon Prince, and a Plaguecaster. We could be casting really a lot of psychic abilities in a valid, let's say, list. But however, so we can be really well presented in the psychic phase. However, Death Card is not a super psychic power oriented army. So we don't have, for example, any abilities that improve our casting, like +1 to the psychic powers, or +1 to deny rolls, or stratagems that can help us cast more successfully, let's say. There are some psychic enhancements possible. We have the relic, the Putrid Repiart, so it's applicable on a Plaguecaster or Sorcerer only. This model, if we use this relic, knows 1 additional power, and once per battle heal D3 lost wounds. So we can know a little bit more powers, but it doesn't help us to more successfully cast these psychic powers. And then we have the Wretched Plague Company that is quite Psyker focused. So we have, if we take the Wretched Plague Company, we have the pre-battle stratagem, the Sevenfold Blessing, and a Wretched Psyker then can know 1 additional power. And once per psychic phase, we can reroll 1 psychic test. And basically, this is our best option to be able to cast psychic powers more successfully, because we can reroll 1 if we fail a psychic test. And then in the Wretched, we also have the Demon's Favor relic for a Plaguecaster only. And this is an improved pestilential ability, fallout ability for even more mortal wounds, but it doesn't really help us cast the powers better. So this is basically the Psykers. So let's start now to look at the Contagion Discipline. So here we have the Contagion Discipline and looking at the powers. So all our Psykers, they know the standard Smite ability, but on top of this we have a selection of 6 psychic powers. So first we have the Miasma of Pestilence, which is unchanged from the previous Codex. It has a warp charge of 6. So to get a 6+, it's a 72% chance with 2 dice. It's a blessing, range 18 inches, and we have to select a visible Death Card unit. Until the next psychic phase, this unit is -1 to be hit So this is really helpful for a lot. Yeah, this has lots of uses. Then we have the Putrescent Vitality, which is the highest warp charge that we have on a 7, so it's only 58% chance to roll this with 2 dice. So here we can select a Death Guard infantry unit. It doesn't have to be visible within 18 inch of the Psyker until our next psychic phase. This Death Guard infantry unit gets +1 strength and +1 toughness. Then we have the Gift of Plagues, which is a new power replacing the very good Blades of Putrefaction. Also warp charge of 6, meaning 72% chance to cast this one, and we can select a Death Guard unit within 18 inches, and until the next of our psychic phase we can add 6-inch range to the unit's contagion abilities to a maximum of 12 inch, which is quite useful to combine, of course, with these new and nice contagion abilities that we have in our codex. The Gift of Contagion, which probably would be a better name to add to the range of the contagion abilities, but the Gift of Contagion is a warp charge 5, so a very high chance of casting that. And this is a malediction, so it targets an enemy unit within 18 inches, and until the next psychic phase, the enemy unit gets -1 strength. And if the warp charge was 8+ instead, which is only a 42% chance to do that, it's the enemy unit additionally will suffer -1 attack. So this could be quite interesting to debuff an enemy melee unit under certain conditions. And then we have the Plague Wind, which is warp charge 6. This is a Witchfire, let's say an aggressive spell to make damage. And here we have to select a visible enemy unit within 18 inches, and here we roll 1 dice for every enemy model in that unit. On a 6+, the unit gets mortal wound, and if the warp was 9+, which is only 28% chance, then we give mortal wounds on 5+ instead. So this could be quite interesting against a very big enemy unit, let's say a 20 model unit, then you would be rolling 20 dice, so that would be quite fun to do a lot of mortal wounds. And then we have the Curse of the Leper. The warp charge is 6 also, and here we have to select the closest visible enemy unit within 18 inches, and then we roll, regardless of the size of this enemy unit, we roll 7d6, 7 dice, and every dice that is higher than the opponent's toughness deals 1 mortal wound. And this can be really interesting if the opponent is suffering the contagion giving -1 toughness. And then, of course, we have the Smite that deals d3 mortal wounds on a 5+ to cast, and d6 mortal wounds if we get 11+, which doesn't happen very often, but it could be quite interesting. Yeah, and remember that if you take multiple Psykers, that it's not possible to cast the same power in the same turn from multiple characters except the Smite. So if we go through the contagion powers in more detail, the Miasma of Pestilence, -1 to be hit. I think this is one of our most helpful powers to protect our units. Getting -1 to be hit means in general that we will be able to, our units, the unit that we cast it on should be able to take 33% more shots on average from enemies that we, for example, hitting on 4+ instead of a normal 3+. And I think this should be an auto-include if you take Mortarion, because Mortarion cannot be really hidden or cannot be protected. So I think it's very important to get Miasma of Pestilence on him, and he can cast it on himself. Also can be helpful on Demon Prince or any other characters or any exposed units, really. I mean, any of our units would be benefiting from the Miasma of Pestilence. So always quite helpful to include. And then we have the new power, the Gift of Plagues, that gives a 6+6-inch range to our contagion of the unit to a max 12 inches. I think this is really helpful, super helpful to put enemies under contagion early in the game. As the game progresses, more and more of the enemy will be in contagion. But with this psychic power, we can make something happen, put some debilitating contagion on the enemy early in the game. For example, what comes to mind is a deep striking Typhus or Lord of Contagion. When they deep strike in turn 2, being Lords of Contagion, they already have a 6-inch contagion range. but when they deep strike, they have to be 9-inch away from enemy units. If we can cast Gift of Contagion on them, Typhus can cast it on himself, or a Plaguecaster can cast it on the Lord of Contagion. Then suddenly, Typhus or Lord of Contagion, they will have a 12-inch contagion range, and this could be really good. For example, if the Lord of Contagion has the Gloaming Bloat, preventing the enemy from overwatching or disallowing them to have rerolls, they can really put the enemy in contagion already from when they deep strike. Mortarion's powers would be increased from 9-inch to 12-inch. This could also help him to charge something with a Gloaming Bloat, for example, and not be overshot. And so this is also a good combination on forward fast units like Bloat Drones or Blight Drones or even Rhinos. If we use the Flash Outbreak stratagem already from turn 1 on this fast unit, it would be getting normally in turn 1 we have only 1-inch contagion range. Then with a Flash Outbreak, it will be counting as turn 2, so 3-inch. And if we cast the Gift of Plagues, we would get 6-inch more, so we can make a 9-inch contagion bubble on this forward unit with the Gift of Plagues. So this can be really good from the start, giving -1 toughness to opponent, spreading the Gloaming Bloat or the Ferric Blight, giving AP plus to our army, or having their movement and other beneficial contagions. And then if we look at Putrescent Vitality, it's a Warp 7. This gives the +1 strength and +1 toughness for the Death Guard infantry unit. Unfortunately, this has increased the required warp to cast, so it's become a power 7 to cast, unfortunately. It's quite a helpful spell. It can help both the survivability by increasing the toughness and the damage output, the melee damage output of our infantry units. So I think this is quite a good combo for Typhus and Poxwalkers if we want to have a Typhus and Poxwalkers heavy type of list. So with this spell, we have the possibility to make the Poxwalkers a strength 5, toughness 5 unit. They benefit from strength 4 from Typhus. They already have toughness 4, so we can get a very cheap unit suddenly becoming strength 5, toughness 5, like we could in the beginning of the 9th and in the 8th edition. The survivability effect +1 toughness is less impactful on our toughness 5 units. The toughness 5 is already quite high and our infantry is quite survivable. It would increase to toughness 6. Of course, it will help on some strength 5 weapons and on strength 6 weapons, and most of the other weapons it's unchanged. Of course, if there are some very high strength 10 or 11, we can also benefit from this, but it probably mostly benefits a Poxwalker unit going from toughness 4 to toughness 5, because there are a lot of strength 4 weapons out there. But of course, if you are facing a lot of strength 5 or strength 6 weapons, putting, let's say, Death Shroud Terminators from toughness 5 to toughness 6 wouldn't hurt. The damage improvement on our melee-oriented infantry, our infantry typically has a strength 4, and going to strength 5, who of course will benefit, and the possessed, they start from strength 5 and can go up to strength 6. This is a bit limited, I think, effect-wise, because we already have the Contagion to give -1 toughness on the enemy in melee. But of course it could be helpful going from strength 4 to strength 5. The Flail of Corruption on a base would be strength 5, and then it would become probably strength 6. Wounding previously toughness 4 Marines when they suffer -1 toughness on a 2+ rerolling one. So the Flail could be really crazy if against toughness 4 units when we use Putrescent Vitality. Here I have gathered our infantry, for example, examples here: Blight Lord Terminators, Death Shroud, Plague Marines, melee-oriented, possessed, and Poxwalkers with Typhus. And this is the standard damage they will be doing across a variety of targets. If we add the Putrescent Vitality, boosting the strength by 1, we will increase here. Overall, it's, let's say, 8-10% more damage we can do with Putrescent Vitality. We can get a couple of wounds more, but it's not, it depends on the target you are fighting, if the +1 strength really helps or not. So all in all, it could be interesting if the toughness and the strength increase can bring us better dice rolls. The biggest issue with this is the relatively high warp charge. Getting a 7 can of course happen, but it's not as consistent as if it's a warp 6 or 5 power. Then if we go to the Gift of Contagion, it's the cheapest one or the easiest to cast, warp 5 let's say. The enemy unit will be suffering -1 strength, and if we have an 8+, the enemy will also be suffering -1 attack characteristic. This can be good in some situation, but really depends on the enemy unit versus your unit. If the strength going down 1 will increase their wound roll. If you can get the 8+ casting, it can be really good if you have, let's say, a big enemy unit with a lot of models that have 2 or 3 attacks each. Taking away 1 attack could be quite helpful. You could be halving the amount of attacks incoming. If it's a strong character with 10 attacks and you remove 1, it's not so important. Then if we look at the two, let's say, offensive psychic powers, the Plague Wind is a warp 6. Here you select a visible unit within 18 inches and you roll a dice for each enemy model in the unit. On a 6+, this gives a mortal wound, and if you have a warp of 9+, then you do mortal wounds on 5s instead. And this can be quite good versus hordes, and I will show you the numbers in the next page. And then moving on to Curse of the Leper, which has become one of my favorites in the new Codex. This affects the closest visible unit. You cannot select like the Plague Wind, and here you roll 7 dice regardless, and of course 7 dice is the Nurgle's number, and regardless of how large the unit is, and each dice that exceeds the target toughness gives a mortal wound to the enemy. So this is an excellent power with a very nice synergy to our -1 toughness contagion. Toughness 4 units, for example, which there are plenty of in the game, they become toughness 3 with the contagion, so we can roll 7 dice dealing mortal wounds on a 4+. So this can be doing a couple of mortal wounds to take out enemies. So this is also very good against infantry characters that, for example, have inval saves and low toughness, for example, Space Marine captains or something with a toughness 4. You could be doing, let's say, 3-4 mortal wounds on a character that's maybe very difficult to attack in some other way. And this doesn't work on high toughness units, of course. If they are more than toughness 6 or 7, basically you cannot use this power. This power is meaningless, so you're better off with a smite or do something else. So here I'm comparing the Witchfire powers, the offensive ones. Here we have the Plague Wind, and this is the expected mortal wounds if we cast it on enemy unit with different models. And of course, the more mortal wounds are given if we are casting it on a very big unit, because we will be running 20 dice here. This factors in if we are successful in casting the power. And here we have the Curse of the Leper, the expected mortal wounds, and this is the opponent toughness, including the effect from -1 toughness contagion. So here we see on a toughness 3 unit, or let's say toughness 4 suffering -1 toughness, we will be doing on average 3.5 mortal wounds. If we have a toughness 3 type infantry unit and we bracket it down to toughness 2, we'll be doing 4.5 wounds on average. And of course, the higher the toughness, the lower the efficiency, and above toughness 6 and higher, we cannot use this power. And the smite we will be doing 1.8 mortal wounds on average. So we can see, if we compare these three, that smite is better than the Plague Wind if the enemy unit has 10 or fewer models. So if you have a normal small unit, it's better to use smite in this case, for example. Smite is better than Curse of the Leper if the enemy toughness is 5 or higher. And the Curse of the Leper is always the best choice versus low toughness targets, including the contagion effect. For toughness 4 targets, Curse of the Leper is better than Plague Wind if the enemy unit has 15 or fewer models. And one of the advantages of Plague Wind is that it doesn't have to target the closest enemy. So, in my opinion, for most battlefield situations, I would suggest the Curse of the Leper over Plague Wind, except if you know you will be facing orcs or Tyranids or something with very large units, that the Plague Wind becomes more interesting. But I think the Curse of the Leper now is the better choice of these two offensive powers overall. So, just a few words on the Plaguecaster and his pestilential fallout ability. So basically, the Plaguecaster deals extra mortal wounds when he successfully manifests power. So each time he does so with a 7+ on his psychic test, the closest enemy unit within 12 inches suffers 1 mortal wound. So this is really good, especially if you, let's say, cast Curse of the Leper or some other offensive power, or even the other ones, you can be doing additional mortal wounds with this. So casting 2 powers per round with no rerolls, you should be dealing on average a little bit more than 1 mortal wound. If you have the 7-fold Blessing Stratagem upgrade in the Wretched Plague Company, so this allows you to do 1 reroll per turn, you would be increasing the mortal wounds to 1.5, rerolling potentially a failed psychic power. And then if we have the Demon's Favor relic from the Wretched Plague Company, then the pestilential fallout ability is replaced, and its new wording is that each time the model manifests a psychic power with 7+, the closest enemy suffers D3 mortal wounds instead of 1 mortal wound. So on average, it doubles here the effect here. Otherwise, the closest enemy within 6 inches suffers 1 mortal wound. And I assume here the otherwise means that if it's successful, but not less than 7, and not that if you're not successful, that you still can do a mortal wound. So if my interpretation is correct here, with 2 powers cast per turn with the Demon's Favor relic, you will be doing an additional 2.7 mortal wounds on average. And if you add the rerolls, you will be doing even more. So the Plaguecaster becomes like a mini mortal wound mean machine. So I think it's really interesting to consider the Plaguecaster and making a very super strong Plaguecaster with a Demon's Favor relic, upgraded with a 7-fold Blessing Stratagem. He will be knowing additional powers, and he will be doing many more mortal wounds, and he'll be really good for small size battles to do this combo and using the Plaguecaster as the HQ for a small patrol battle. Let's say 500 or 1,000 points could be really interesting, and in a smaller area, a smaller map, he will be close to do mortal wounds on enemies. So, reaching to the conclusion of the video, the summary and final thoughts. Here is my ranking and rating of the different powers. I think so the top ones in my book are Miasma of Pestilence, which is always helpful, and I think it's a must probably if you take Mortarion. The Gift of Plagues, I think, can be really game defining early in the game if you use it successfully, and if you take some of these contagions that can really apart from the -1 toughness, but if you get some of the others and you can apply them early on to the enemy, you can gain an advantage with the Gift of Plagues. Then Curse of the Leper is one I really enjoy using this one, and I really like the synergy that it has with the -1 toughness contagion. That then we can do a lot of mortal wounds. Putrescent Vitality is a really good one, but can be a bit difficult to cast. And then I think the Plague Wind I would only consider taking if I was playing a Horde army as the opponent, but I would prefer, right now I'm preferring Curse of the Leper instead of the Plague Wind. And then Gift of Contagion could be good in some situations if you can get the -1 attack casting on an 8+, but I think overall Gift of Contagion is not as good as some of the other options. So Death Guard has access to some good psychic powers, even if this is not our biggest strength. and I would always consider taking Miasma of Pestilence and a Gift of Plagues as my first choices. And as I said, Miasma is almost an auto-include if we have Mortarion. Gift of Plagues really helps us if we are also taking some Plague Company contagions and we deep strike a lot of contagion or typhus, etc. Curse of the Leper, as I said, one of my favorites, together with one toughness contagion, Putrescent Vitality, and so on. And yeah, Plague Wind I would only consider useful versus horde opponents. A Gift of Contagion is the least, let's say, overall usable. And additionally, with the Pestilential Fallout ability and the Wretched Plague Company, I think Plaguecaster and the Wretched upgrades make for a really nice Psyker with extra mortal wounds. So this concludes the video. What do you think about the powers, and what has your experience been on the battlefield, and do you agree with my rating here? If you like this video, please press like and subscribe to the channel, where I will be bringing many more videos on Death Card tactics. If you want to support my efforts a bit more, please visit my Patreon page and become a patron and join the discussion of the roadmap, next videos, and get some exclusive content there. And with those words, General Yanis is signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.